Well, for more, Sanam Shantyaei from our International Affairs Desk joins me now in studio. Sanam, just talk us through why exactly Gibraltar is turning out to be such a hurdle in the final stages of this Brexit deal before it goes to the summit in Brussels on Sunday.
Sharon, I think what's interesting, as we heard in that report here, is that we're getting such mixed messages from both sides on the issue of Gibraltar. On the one hand, Theresa May had us believe yesterday that she potentially had an agreement with her Spanish counterpart. Then came that rather surprising tweet from Pedro Sanchez saying that they remain far on what, of course, the Spanish want the text and the document to be tighter when it comes to the future status of this rather small disputed peninsula, and it's only Spain and the Brits that get to negotiate over it, not the European Union. Now, going back to your question, why is it so significant? Why is it proven to be such a major sticking point? Firstly, there's a territorial issue. Of course, Gibraltar has been a British territory since 1713, but when it comes to its geography, it happens to be just off the coast of Spain. So for many years, for a very long time, Spain has claimed sovereignty over it. Now, what we know is that Gibraltar is expected to leave the EU along with Britain if Brexit goes ahead at the end of March, despite the fact that 96% of its residents actually voted to remain. So that's one sticking point. Another, and this is what many observers are saying, that is that it's more of a domestic issue for the Spanish government, because the socialist government led by Pedro Sanchez is getting a lot of heat from the opposition Conservatives, saying, you should have used this as an opportunity during the Brexit negotiations to gain more control over Gibraltar. And of course, we have the elections coming up in Andalusia next month, and that will be the first electoral vote, a decision on how Pedro Sanchez's government is doing. So a lot at stake here. But I think, as we heard in that report earlier by Ivana Scatola, that the main issue to look at here is that actually this isn't one of the biggest hurdles. The biggest hurdle is when this deal goes back at home amongst these MPs who've been scrambling and fighting and debating over what the content of the deal should be.
And in the UK, the former Brexit minister, or one of them, is now saying that staying in the EU is better than the current deal on the table. What could this mean for Brexit? Will it have any consequences?
Well, first came, of course, Dominic Raab's resignation, and now this very explicit opposition to the deal. And it's unsurprising that a number of MPs have seized on his comments to potentially call for yet another referendum. They're saying, look, Dominic Raab was only a week and a half ago, just over that, negotiating the deal of Theresa May. Now he's saying it's safer to stay within the European Union than to go ahead with that accord. So if MPs have the opportunity to go back on themselves, then surely the general public should also be given an opportunity to cast their ballot once more. And I had a look, Sharon, at some recent polls that have been published by YouGov that say that if indeed, hopefully that will come up at some point, this goes to a second referendum, some 47% of the general public would want to vote to stay within the European Union, and only 29% would vote to leave. Now, I think the bigger question for us to address is what would happen if this vote goes back and the lawmakers in the UK, I think it's happening around 11th, 12th or 13th of December, actually reject the agreement. What would happen there? Well, this is uncharted territory, but there are a few options on the table. May could potentially go back and try again, but earlier today she said that she may not be able to get a great deal from the EU, more to bring to the table. The other option is something that I mentioned earlier, a second referendum, or it could in fact be a Brexit without a deal, which many observers are saying it could lead to a great deal of chaos. And last but not least, an idea is being touted of a general election being called. But I think the one thing that we're seeing now, as always when it comes to the topic of Brexit, is uncertainty looming here.
Exactly. We'll wait to see how events unfold over the weekend, of course, in Brussels. Sanam Shantyaei, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.